Good afternoon. My name is Imani Johnson. I am a senior at Anacostia High School in the District of Columbia. Also, I am the captain of the cheer team. I participate with a program called Urban Lunch, which provided me with a mentor from Street Law. At Street Law, I interned for Mrs. Johnson, assisting her with programs she oversees. I chose to work at Street Law because in the future, I plan to be a lawyer and then a judge. So I am very pleased to be interviewed today. Mr. Burnett, can you tell me a little about yourself?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I happened to reach, fortunately, the good age of 80 years of age, but at 19, I faced death in connection with the Civil Rights Movement. I started as a little country boy, rural Spotsylvania, Virginia, came to Howard University in 1952, and I'll tell you in more detail about the story of my life. Today, I'm the National African American Drug Policy Coalition Executive Director, heading a group of 1.5 million black professionals to keep people out of prison, to work with youth to encourage educational excellence, to excel and become major contributors to the welfare of this nation.
So, Mr. Burnett, what was your characteristics like when you were growing up?
I was born in 1935 in segregated America, where Negroes, or coloreds we were then called, were merely considered people to be servants, to be caretakers, gardeners. And I grew up as a little boy in rural Spotsylvania, Virginia, made famous by Alex Haley in the TV series called Roots. Indeed, my roots may go back to Kunta Kinte because genealogically I'm triracial. I have a great-great-grandfather who was white Irish, and I have 2 great-grandmothers who are American Indians. But I grew up as a little country boy where they had built up a subdivision around us occupied by all white people. And as a little Negro boy, I had many lawns to mow, many other chores. And when I got to high school and I told my neighbors I wanted to be a lawyer, they said, "You don't want to do that. There's no business for Negro lawyers in America. You got all these jobs where you wash cars, wash windows, being a handyman. We can keep you busy for life." I said, I just don't want to limit myself to that. I want to go to college. Even my high school principal wanted me to go to Tuskegee to become a farm expert because there was no future in 1951 and 52 for Negro lawyers in America. And then he said, become a school teacher, then go to Virginia Union and become a preacher because I had been a youth minister, 14, 15, 16 years of age, 70, speaking in black churches or Negro churches about quality of life and how Negroes should aspire to equality in America. And so I persisted in aspiring to become a lawyer. My first job out of high school at 17 years of age, young lady, was as a busboy at Howard Johnson Restaurant, where I was the only person of color allowed in the service area to clean up the tables. And Negroes had to come to the back door and buy their chicken or hamburgers in a bag, but they couldn't even come inside and eat. As a matter of fact, I could have been Michael Brown, because in July of 1952, on a Saturday, one of my father's vehicles was in the shop, and I had to wait for him to pick me up, and Mr. Overton had left me there to clean up, finish mopping up, and lock up the place. And about 11:20 at night, while I was waiting for my father to come pick me up, 2 white police officers drove up, car squeaked to a halt. They jumped out, squat position, pistols pointed at me as close as we get to the window over there. And I said, "Officer, what's the problem? I work here." The driver said, "Yeah, I bet you do." And I said, "Really? I'm the busboy. Mr. Overton left me here to finish cleaning up and locking up the place." My father drove up. They made him park his car at least 30 or 40 yards behind the squad car, and they factually arrested me and put me in the police car. Fortunately, they took me to the home of Mr. Overton rather than the police station. And Mr. Overton chewed them out and said, "Yes, he is my busboy, and he's such a good worker. I hope he wasn't going off to college, because I would make him my night manager." And they released me to go home. But if I had been smart aleck or profane, cursing like a lot of young black boys do today, and became aggressive with the police officer, or if I had reached down like I was reaching for some physical object, I could have been shot that night because two officers had the guns pointed at me closest, the videographer in this case. But I was quiet, I was meek, I was respectful, and I lived at age 33 to become the first general counsel over the Metropolitan Police Department in 1968 to restore order in D.C. following the assassination of Martin Luther King. So I tell youngsters, be civil and respectful. Don't be cursing. Don't be profane. Don't become disorderly. Don't become rebellious and use language, say, what are you messing with me? But they don't use the word messing, they use a lot more profane word. And then it escalates. And then the officer said, why are you questioning my authority? And they both become aggressive with each other and they end up with the Michael Browns or the Trayvon Martins. That's one of my involvement in civil rights history. I came here to Howard. I had not even had geometry. And even though I graduated as valedictorian in my class, my English essay as an entering freshman wasn't up to standards, and I had to take high school remedial English. I took 2 high school remedial courses my first semester at Howard. I only earned 11 hours of college credits. But I know something about the word, I shall overcome, even before I even knew of Martin Luther King. Because I made straight A's. Went to the dean of the School of Liberal Arts. Pled with him to let me take 23 hours because I wanted to be even with my classmates. And he said, young boy, you got a lot of courage. Like, I hope you're with us next fall. I said, I'm going to prove that I'm going to be with you. After an hour and a half of pleading, an hour and a half of demonstrating the work ethic I had, and the drive I had, and the mission I felt I had in life, he approved. I made straight A's in all 23 courses, ended up number 1 in my class. That started me on my civil rights journey. Because as a result of being number 1, I was designated by Howard to be the Howard University spokesperson on the Adam Clayton Powell program beginning my sophomore year, fall of '53. And every Saturday, I would go down to V Street to an old warehouse type building that Adam Clayton Powell had a radio program, protesting segregation in America. And I coined the phrase that a person should be judged by the quality of his performance. And I'm going to be very candid. In 1952, we weren't focusing on women's rights. I think the language and the talk was in terms of him and he. We were just talking about black or Negro, colored versus white. And I said a person should be judged by the quality of performance. And I used the analogy of a car, that when you buy a car, you want to know how well the engine functions, how many miles you get to it. People should be judged by the quality of their performance and what they can do and their ability, not the color of their skin, not the accident of their lives. Little did I realize that my advocacy would put me in jeopardy for my life. Because May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court rendered the famous decision of Brown versus Board of Education. And I said, just kind of smugly to myself, it's kind of time the Supreme Court agreed with me. But little did I realize it would impact my life personally. Because in October of 1954, James Neighbor, who was vice president of Howard, who had been chief counsel in Sharp v. Poland, one of the 5 cases involved with Brown, called me to his office and confronted me. Said, Arthur, I know you came here to go to Howard and Howard Law School, but you are the best we have. You are from Virginia. You are our ready-made plaintiff. We want you to become the key plaintiff in the Prince Edward Farmville school cases. We want you to apply to law school now in your junior year for the 6-year combination program to apply to those law schools in the top 10 in the nation and the University of Virginia. We want to use you to break the back of massive resistance to desegregation that Commonwealth Virginia was embarking on at the time. And He said he might mean you'll face death because the Ku Klux Klan is threatening to kidnap and lynch any nigger kid who would try to desegregate a school in Virginia. Indeed, in 5 counties, they closed schools. They were issuing press releases to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, to the Fredericksburg Freelance Star. And I guess being young and being 19 at the time, I didn't even bother to consult my parents. I thought I was grown. So I went and said, gritted my teeth and said, yes, I will do it. And he turned to a gentleman sitting in the corner and said, this gentleman here, by the way, is Thurgood Marshall. He will be your chief counsel. I will be his chief assistant. Oliver Hill and Spotswood Robertson, the chief lawyers, will be the other lawyers in the case. I applied to Columbia, NYU, Syracuse, Boston, University of Virginia. The first communication I got from the first 4, you are admitted. They didn't even call me in for an interview. Virginia, Stonewall, and Thurgood said we got them where we wanted. We got the best law schools in the country. They didn't even see need to interview you. And then they start planning on going into federal court in Richmond or in Alexander to get a mandatory injunction to compel the University of Virginia Law School to admit me with the National Guard or the U.S. Army to back me up in the fall of September of 1955. February and March of 55, they were in fact telling me they were talking with Herb Burnett, the Attorney General. At the moment my case went public, 2 deputy marshals would be assigned to me to treat me like I was a material witness and keep me alive. And from February and March until April, I was just waiting for the shoe to fall, where I would be taken into protective custody and have 2 marshals living with me pending the suit. And then Governor Orville Forbes started making noises about closing all the colored schools in Arkansas. And lo and behold, around April 17th, 18th, a couple of days after tax deadline, David called me to his office. And I thought he was about ready to tell me they were going into federal court. And in a rather bilious voice, say, Thurgood and the NACP have decided they got to deal with this Arkansas situation. And they don't have enough money to go forward both in Virginia in your case. I'm going to be very candid with you. I recall standing in front of a chair. I don't remember collapsing, but when I did come to my senses, I was seated in the chair and like I had fainted away. And we have to settle your case and deal with Virginia another day. They wrote out a settlement agreement with Virginia, anticipation of my suit, where they promised to pay all of my bills or expenses and send me to Columbia or any other law school. Columbia was my first choice. But 3 weeks later, NYU wrote me a letter where they said, in addition to Virginia paying your expenses, we will give you a full faculty scholarship to come here. And we will make you a teaching assistant in the Masters of Law program with Emma Zola Berman, who was then considered either number 1 or number 2 in the nation in negligence and medical malpractice. I ended up going to NYU Law School. That's how I ended up in NYU Law School. That was my first encounter with becoming vacuum cleaned and sucked into the civil rights movement of this country. I went to NYU Law School in the fall of '55, and I was shocked to find out I was the only person of color in my class. My professors were overly egalitarian, but Thurgood had told me, I want you as a little colored boy from rural Spotsylvania, Virginia, to go to New York and prove you could be as brilliant as any Jewish kid they could find. By the way, there were only 3 white women in my class. I was the only person of color. My professors were overly egalitarian in that every other time a student was called on for any question in class, I was that student. I got over equality, but I was always prepared. I played chess, and the Jewish males and females galvanized around me like I was from outer space. And I told them, see, what you're missing by segregation and murder, and not judging people as based on their talent and their abilities and what they can do. Lo and behold, at the end of my second year, I was number 11 in my class out of almost 300 students. My Jewish friends approached me and said, Arthur, instead of going in the military and being a JAG officer, why don't you apply to the honors program in the Justice Department and then the Atomic Energy Commission? Reluctantly, I thought it'd be a charade just going through the motions. But on the last day, I applied to both. Ultimately, ended up being offered positions with both. Took one in the Department of Justice, and joined the U.S. Department of Justice in June of 1958. But my local draft board did not hold up, and I was drafted in the Army as a private. E1, just like a high school graduate, in November. I went on active duty. It was assigned to a headquarters office, and end of 2 years, ended up doing the duties of a full colonel. But that's another chapter I won't get into now, but because that's not civil rights as much as what happened afterwards. I came back to Justice Department. The Kennedy administration was being installed. And the second day that Robert Kennedy was Attorney General, he called for me. And I ended up with the hottest job in government. One that I've only been allowed to review by the Obama administration. January 21, he called for me and said, Arthur, I want you to be my liaison to the criminal division to keep me advised of all the major criminal cases. But then he dropped a bombshell. He said, that's your cover. I said, what do you mean? He said, I know your history and your intellectual accomplishments. The fact that you put your life on the line for the civil rights movement. I want you to be my go-between between me and Jack Goldberg. I want you to read all the reports and keep me advised of everything that I and the president needs to know as to whether there is evidence of the Communist Party infiltrating the Martin Luther King movement to possibly cause another civil war in this country. To make sure that the FBI do not engage in any unlawful law enforcement practices, and to make sure black leaders, you're not even to tell your fellow lawyers or the Assistant Attorney General this confidential assignment. Only person you can talk to will be me, Wizard White, who was then Deputy Attorney General, and when Wizard left, Nick Katzenbach, and President of the United States. Your phone will be tapped. You'll be under surveillance by the FBI to make sure you don't reveal any classified information. For 3.5 years, I did that for the Kennedy administration. I was the eyes and ears. I was the butler valet, so most of the senior white lawyers thought at the Justice Department. I spent 3 or 4 hours a day with Bobby Kennedy. I was closer to him than Burt Marshall, Mr. Civil Rights. I was with him on the Selma March, sitting across the table from him. For 3.5 years, I lived the life of a CIA agent. It's only been with Obama and Eric Holder that I've been authorized to even tell the public that at this point. And I still cannot reveal anything that's classified. Anything I write will have to be cleared by the White House and by the Attorney General's office. I wondered where I got the courage when I look back. I'm going to tell you, when I read about Ed Snowden and the problems he has, it brought home to me what a precarious position I was in. But at that point I was young and courageous. And I told the Attorney General, I will do it. He said, you're not even to tell your wife what you're doing. Just tell them that you're doing work as my special assistant. So it's only been the last 2 or 3 years that I've been able to even tell people that I was a monitor. I was the undercover agent for the Kennedy administration in monitoring the civil rights movement. When Martin came here in August of '63, I was the undercover agent to make sure the police did not provoke riots or anybody else. When he gave us a I Have a Dream speech, when he came here for jobs, justice, and freedom. I probably know more about the Martin Luther King movement than John Lewis or Jesse Jackson. Most of which I have to take to my grave with me. Bobby left to run for the Senate for New York. I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office as a senior prosecutor, thought my days involvement in civil rights was over. Lo and behold, Martin gets assassinated April 4, 1968. Mayor Walter Washington decided he needed a lawyer over the police department to restore recovery from the riots on 8th Street and 14th Street. Julian Dugard was the city administrator. Julian Dugard had been the junior lawyer on my case in Prince Edward Farmville school case with Thurgood Marshall. I was recommended and selected to be the lawyer over the police department when John Layton was chief of police. John Wilson and Maurice Callahan. I was the one that wrote their testimony. I was the one that issued their general orders and monitored the police activity in '68 to aid the recovery from the assassination of Martin Luther King. That's my civil rights history that's been hidden. I've been the invisible black man in the civil rights movement of this country.